Live from SABC headquarters in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, welcome to this week's first edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvoko. On the show tonight, a looming cost of living crisis as South Africans face big fuel hikes. Can we now avoid a recession?
Eskom has accumulated debt to the extent that its capacity to service that debt now is questionable.
The governing party's youth is fed up with their leaders tiptoeing around Eskom. The ANC Youth tell us why they now want to take their leaders on, even if it means paying the price for it. Our panel for this evening looks at Eskom's 400 billion rand debt and its implications for the country. All that and more in tonight's episode of The Watchdog, which starts right now. Motorists can expect more pain at the pump this week after the government announced another fuel hike for July. The Department of Mineral Resources and Energy says that all grades of petrol will go up by between R2.37 and R2.57 a litre. All grades of diesel increase by R2.32, while paraffin sees a R1.66 increase per litre.
The Department of Mineral Resources and Energy announced fuel increases from Wednesday. Higher fuel prices have been pushed up by various factors, including the weaker rand-dollar exchange rate and higher crude oil prices. The fuel price increase comes as government's 75-cent reduction in the fuel levy to relieve struggling consumers would expire on the 3rd of August 2022.
The main reason for this adjustment is the higher oil prices, which led to higher prices of petroleum products during the period under review. We have seen on the other side that the rand strengthened against the dollar and cushioned the prices by around 20 cents per litre. When it comes to LP gas, we have seen that it's dropping by 2.18 cents. And the reason for the drop in LP gas is mainly because of lower demand for LP gas in Europe and in the USA.
Higher fuel prices will push up the current higher inflationary pressures. The consumer price inflation breached the Reserve Bank's target range of between 3 and 6% in May. The CPI recorded 6.5%. The Automobile Association of South Africa says government needs to urgently review the fuel price structure in the country.
We think that government does need to take some control, and that control is doing the review of the fuel price as has been suggested.
The Motor Industry Staff Association says there's no urgency from government to review the fuel pricing methodology to bring relief to motorists against soaring fuel prices. The fuel price increase comes on the back of rising Brent crude oil prices because of the conflicts between Russia and Ukraine and rising demand in China, among other factors. Nothando Makutulela, SABC News, Johannesburg.
We're now joined by former UCT Professor of Economics, founder and Chief Executive of Pan-African Investment and Research Services, Dr. Iraj Abedian. Dr. Iraj, good evening. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you. Good evening to you and our viewers, Vuyo.
Well, are the government's hands really tied?
Absolutely. Government is literally caught between a rock and a hard place. They don't have the fiscal resources to keep subsidizing the price of petrol. They have, at the same time, missed about almost 20 years to get the national network of transportation such that our dependency on petrol as an economy becomes a lot more efficient. We are highly inefficient in terms of trucking, transportation, urban and intracity and intercity. So all of that means the government has got almost no option, which means passing on the cost to the consumer at a time that the consumers are under extreme pressure. The macroeconomy is also under pressure in the sense that international inflation is high. Oil and fuel prices broadly have been and will continue to be elevated for some times to come, possibly for a year or so. And that means consumers are going to bear the burden of rising prices and very, very tough financial conditions.
And that's where the problem is, isn't it? The fact that, I mean, your taxi operators or bus operators are going to pass it on to the consumer.
They have no choice. Taxi is a day-to-day cut into working class spending powers. At the end of the month, they're going to have so much less. But at the same time, as we all know, the country is a massive country from one place to another. Transportation of goods is expensive. So everything on the shelf in the next month or so are going to be so much higher. So price of bread, price of basic subsistence items. Again, the working class is going to be on the receiving end of it. And of course, the poor, those who are independent, and then there are about 18 million of them, about a third of our population, roughly, on a government welfare handout, which is fixed. Prices go up, so the poor and the pensioners are going to really be hard done by.
I had some people today saying that the government is not completely helpless. We can go elsewhere to negotiate, the price of oil. Do such possibilities even exist?
Only maybe once off. You change the base less, so I don't know what they are thinking of, if it's Angola, if it's Nigeria, if it's wherever. You can go to Russia and get discounted oil, which is now very common in the global market, but that's a once-off change. You can't continuously get a discount. You get a discount 30%, and from there on, it will go up. And remember, the price of petrol is also affected by the foreign exchange rate. So to the extent that our economy stalls, we're going to have our foreign exchange under pressure. So even if the dollar price of oil stabilizes, we're going to have the pressure of a depreciating exchange rate. Bear in mind, Vuyo, that the next month, even if the dollar price stays the same, the rand has already depreciated, and that depreciation is not in tomorrow's or in Wednesday's price increases. So we have a number of variables that we have to take care of, and government is at the moment is very, very inactive, is not proactive in dealing with some of the issues related to growth, stabilization of the macro environment, stabilization of energy and other infrastructure.
Anything that can be done levy-wise?
Levy-wise, 1.50 rand per liter. If the government liberalizes the supply network, that will come down. Of course, the government can continue giving that 1.50 rand for another month or 2 or 3. But then on the other hand, government's national budget is under pressure. So it would have to borrow more, because it doesn't have the tax base. The economy is not growing. So that's why I said the government is caught between the rock and a hard place, because the more they subsidize, the more there'll be budget deficit, which means more borrowing and more macroeconomic instability.
I don't know if you've seen it. Apparently, the Democratic Alliance had a briefing today. They plan to come up with a bill. I don't know if you've seen any of that.
I have not seen it, Vuyo. I apologize if there is a new policy proposal.
Yeah, but I mean, what could someone still do that which the government has not been able to do?
Vuyo, it's much like many other complex socioeconomic issues. It's not a one simple variable that you have to do. You got to, in a medium to long term, something that we should have started 15 years ago. We need to reduce the energy dependency of our economic and social activities. That means a far more fuel efficient transportation system for the city, a far more efficient railway for this massive country, as opposed to trucking everything, destroying roads and environment and so on and so forth, and consuming a lot more imported fuel. So the government has to deal with short-term issues, but structural medium to long-term issues get neglected decade after decade, and then we run into this type of conditions where China or Russia invades Ukraine and somebody else invades somebody else, then we get caught. So we mustn't look for a simple bullet solution. The systemic issues require a complex solution. Some of them are medium term, some of them short term, and some of them long term. That's how we should approach these issues.
Given all our problems and where things are at the moment, people have been talking about the big R. You know, is a recession now inevitable?
At a global level, we're going to have a recession, which is absolutely inevitable, but its intensity is going to differ from one country to another. The nature of recession in China would be different from America, America different from South Africa. What we are heading for at the same time, and the twin of recession is also inflation, which in the language of economics becomes stagflation. In other words, the economy stagnates, doesn't grow. At the same time, inflation keeps high and rising. So we need to expect in the next 2 years, the combination of higher than what we have up to now experienced, inflation, at the same time, lower, possibly much lower than growth that we have been gotten used to. And that combination is going to be extremely difficult to manage politically and socially.
Is it unfair to say we belong to a group that will be hardest hit if you are to split the world into half?
Not at all. There is a group of economies around the globe that are called fragile economies. Economies that are really on the edge, meaning their growth is fragile, their macroeconomic stability is fragile, unemployment is high, poverty is high, and their growth is not nearly as high as it should be, and at any moment it may go even lower. And that's South Africa is amongst those basket of countries or group of countries that are really fragile economies and requires very, very intentional, sustained, strategic, political interventions. And unfortunately, as you know better than me, our government has not shown that determination and that consistency, and it's very difficult to predict what they're going to do.
Mm-hmm. If we were to be intentional, to use your word, about cushioning the blow, what are the sort of things that we need to do right now?
We need to, with almost immediate effect, implement, not talk about, implement with timeline, with groups in charge, a very integrated and systematic investment in our infrastructure, not just energy, which we know what needs to be done, but government doesn't do it. They instead talk about it, and they have another meeting about it. We need to get our port and infrastructure right. We need to upgrade our rails so that we bring the cost of transportation down. Yes, we're not going to see the impact in the next 6 months, but we are going to see the impact in the next 24 months. And that's the type of intervention that we have to do. We need to move from talk to action, and very, very much a type of actions that is efficient, that is transparent, and can attract investment. And this is the sad part of it, that at the global level, there is no shortage of capital, even in these tough conditions. There is shortage of well-designed, well-intended, and implemented infrastructure programs and projects, not just in South Africa, on the entire continent, and many other countries. And we need to use this opportunity to turn our economy around.
And at individual and household levels, what can people still do?
Very difficult for me to say that we must save, because many people go hand to mouth and they're going to even more hard pressed. But at least for those who can, for those who have jobs, they need to minimize their borrowing. They need to focus on the essentials and be prepared and anticipate tougher times ahead so that they can weather the next 24 months.
That's all we're going to leave it. Thank you very much, Dr. Abedian, for your time this evening. Dr. Iraj Abedian was a former UCT professor of economics, but is also the founder and chief executive of Pan-African Investment and Research Services. After the break, we speak to the ANC Youth League National Task Team spokesperson, Sizopila Mkhize, who has thrown a cat among pigeons. She says they are fed up with Eskom and of the ANC leadership's indifference to the mess at the power utility. She joins us on the line from Durban. Good evening, Sizopila. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Vuyo, and good evening to your viewers at home.
Well, a very bold statement from that report I read last week. What actually happened? What triggered it?
Look, being young and staying with young people, seeing what young people are going through, leading young people who are going through frustrations that they are going through, especially with the load shedding that is happening, how young people seem to be losing the little that they have because of load shedding. Because for some young people, load shedding does not mean that lights are off and then you can sleep. It means that lights are off and you are losing money. The money that young people would have borrowed to start off their businesses, because even the government is not assisting them enough to be able to start off their businesses. So they take out loans. Young people take out loans to start off their businesses. And when they start off their businesses, probably the first year or two, you use those years to be able to gather enough money or enough income so that you can be able to pay off your debts. But how does that happen when the lights are cut 4 hours in a day? It was really just a frustration of where we come from. I mean, young people are institutions of higher learning. Young people are in high schools and primary schools that we are leading. It's just the frustration that comes from them. And we thought to ourselves that we can no longer be silent about this issue. And we've spoken about this in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, when the CEO of Eskom was appointed. And we said his appointment is not going to do any good in Eskom because we read his history. We know what he has done in other big companies that he has been at the helm of. He has ran them down through their knees, all of them. Now you bring the same man to Eskom and you say, and Eskom had problems. Eskom had already had problems in what in how they described it when this new CEO came in. Eskom already had problems. But now, why do you want to bring a person that has a very bad history of leading institutions, of leading companies, a person that has run down companies? Now, our frustration comes from that, but also our frustration comes from the manner in which our government seems not to care about this crisis of electricity, about this crisis of Eskom, about this crisis of South Africa that is in the dark.
Okay.
Like they not to care. We know the people that are at the helm and the people that are responsible. I mean, nobody wants to hold Pravin Gordhan accountable. Nobody wants to hold De Ruta accountable. Everybody is running away from it, and everyone wants to hide behind an excuse that the workers are striking. We have had so many excuses, Vuyo. If it's not the coal that is wet, there's a conveyor belt that is not working. If it's not the conveyor belt that is not working, it's the workers that are striking. There's always an excuse to keep South Africa back.
Do you think Andre de Ruyter should go?
I think him and Pravin Gordhan should go.
But, Pravin Gordhan is a deployee of your organization, put there by your president, both of whom, or the government you're saying, is indifferent.
The reason that we, in the constitution of the ANC Youth League, of the ANC, we are called an autonomous body of the ANC, is that we are not going to subscribe to all the mediocrity that the ANC leadership will come with. were different, were autonomous, and our thinking is definitely going to be different from those of the old guard. And our thinking as things stand right now is that the president of the ANC, the president of the country, needs to act, and he must do it very quickly, Vuyo. He must fire Pravin Gordhan, not reshuffle, not put Gordhan in another department, because all the departments that he has been given to lead, he has not done any justice to them. So Pravin must go, Ruth must go. He must be very decisive as the president of the country. That's what you expect from the president of the country. You expect a very decisive person. Today, we saw another hike in petrol prices. South Africa is becoming a time-ticking bomb. And I can tell you, Vuyo, that there's going to come a time where our voices as young people maybe who are in the ANC are not going to matter. There's going to come a time where voices of any political formation do not matter. The society is going to lead itself. And when that happens, when society leads itself to the streets, when society leads itself, it's going to be very sour, and it is going to be like there is some ambush of the current government. And it's not, it's just that South Africans need a government that listens. And that is not what South Africans are getting. So the fact that we're in the ANC ourselves, the fact that we're members of the ruling party ourselves, does not mean that we can keep quiet when things are going wrong. Those who are benefiting from the things that are going wrong can keep quiet, of course. Us who are not beneficiaries of any particular thing that may go wrong in Eskom, in the dealings of petrol prices hiking, in everything wrong that is happening in South Africa, we're going to speak, be it that we get suspended from the African National Congress, but it is the African National Congress that taught us that we stand for the people, and the people right now are frustrated pretty much with Eskom. They are frustrated with the constant hiking prices of petrol, and we stand as the ANC Youth League. We choose to stand on the side of the people, and that is where you're always going to find us. So we're calling on the president of South Africa, the president of the country, Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa, to act, fire Pravin Gordhan, dissolve the board of Eskom, and fire that man called Ruth. There are so many people that we think are professionally, and they have the good experience that is needed. They have the required experience. They have the required knowledge. They can be able to take Eskom forward. And I do not want to buy into the story of the excuses of some plants not working for some years, some plants not have been finished for some years. I think that what we're having and what is our problem right now, Vuyo, and the viewers at home, is an incompetent leadership at Eskom, an incompetent leadership at the Department of State-Owned Enterprises.
Why do you think you could even be suspended for raising these issues in the manner that you're raising them?
This month marks a year when I personally was almost suspended in the African National Congress for going to Phoenix in Durban. Where blacks were killed, where there were riots, and nobody seemed to care. I went there and I received a letter. I saw a statement. Actually, I never received a letter. I saw a statement where the ANC was contemplating on getting us into a disciplinary hearing. So that alone showed us that, okay, it means we can no longer have a voice as young people in the African National Congress. That is why, I say this on purpose. When I say that, be it that was suspended or expelled in the ANC, I say this on purpose because there was a time where I got almost kicked out in the African National Congress for speaking the views of the people that I, as the African National Congress Youth League spokesperson, lead. For speaking on the views that the people that we are leading as young people of the African National Congress believe into. So I keep on saying that on purpose so that the people can know that it's not everything that is happening that must be attributed to the African National Congress at large, but it must be attributed to the individuals who can be members of the African National Congress. Because I can tell you, Vuyo, I'm a member of the African National Congress myself. There are many members of the African National Congress, but who are not happy with the issue of the Eskom, who are not happy with the issue of the constant petrol hike. And unfortunately, we have no other home to voice these things to but the African National Congress. So we're going to keep on raising these uncomfortable truths. And it's just unfortunate that when one speaks about these things, we are labeled as one faction over the other. But the African National Congress that we joined, the African National Congress that I joined when I turned 18, the African National Congress that says it is the leader of the society. So if you're a leader of the society and the society is frustrated, you must provide solutions. And right now I can tell you that our people are frustrated and there is no solution. There is no willingness on the side of the government to provide solutions. And I don't want to believe, Vuyo, that there are no solutions in their hands. I think they have solutions. We also have solutions that we've presented to them. And said, these are the solutions. That is what we think must happen. So I don't think that the crisis that we are in needs a magician or it needs a divine intervention. It does not need Jesus to come down. It needs the cabinet, the president of South Africa, to act by holding accountable the people who are responsible of Eskom, the person that is responsible for the Department of Public Enterprises. Those are the people who must be held accountable. We don't need Jesus to come down to fix our issues. We know exactly where the problem is, and we must be very decisive.
What do you say to those people who say you are indeed fighting factional ANC battles, but you've chosen something that you know will resonate with a lot of people?
For a very long time, we've been always on the side of the people. For a very long time. Of course, I would not want to act wholly, Vuyo, and say that one has not been involved in some factional battles of the ANC. But as much as one may have been involved in one way or the other in the factional battles of the ANC, but we have always stood on the side of the people. Even when it means that we fight with our own comrades, in our own corners, the comrades that we agree with at times, we fight with them when they choose the other side except the side of the people. Ours is always on the side of the people. So when people are frustrated, that is where you are going to find us. I mean, I can count so many instances, Vuyo. Senegal, before the EFF could go to Senegal, I was in Senegal. Before EFF could go to Colini, I was in Colini in the northwest. I was in Senegal in the Free State. I was in Phoenix in Durban. We've always stood on the side of the people, and I can say this now, and I can say it 40 years later, that it does not matter who's at the helm at the moment, but for as long as things are not going well, there must be people that are able to tell that particular person that you're not doing well. And the problem is that our leaders have surrounded themselves with yes ma'am, yes sir, people who would not tell you when you do wrong, people who would not be brave enough to tell you that, here, my chief, you're not doing well, and this is how things should go. This is what people want from you. And as the African National Congress, as the ANC Youth League ourselves, we understand why we were formed in the first place. And I can tell you, maybe today, 50% of the things that we do are not the things that we were formed for as the African National Congress and as the African National Congress Youth League. We were formed to deliver people to the total liberation. And we have not reached the total liberation even today. We have not reached the total liberation today because we choose battles, we choose when to fight and when not to fight. Let me ask you a question, Vuyo. I know you're the one conducting the interview, but maybe let me pose a question to you. When last did you hear from rating agencies? How is the rand doing today?
The rand did well today. It rallied.
And how
But anyway, have you discussed this as this matter extensively as the National Youth Task Team?
Well, the previous Youth Task Team discussed this thing immensely in 2019, and the current leadership, there was an NEC meeting just a few days ago. I think they might have finished today, where the convener of the task team and the coordinator of the task team are present, and they've presented our views, they've presented how we feel about it. And as things stand, we're planning on mobilizing young people from all political parties, from all spheres of life, to the streets to voice our frustrations, because maybe that is a shutdown language, is a language that might be understood by those in power at the moment. So we have discussed, we have spoken about these things, but it seems to be falling on deaf ears. So maybe the next option will be running in the streets, talking about it in the streets, shutting down basically the economy of South Africa, because in any case, the load shedding itself is crippling the economy of South Africa. So maybe if you shut it down for a day or two, do a sit-in at Eskom, get into the offices of Eskom and do a sit-in, whatever that will make the government, whatever that will make the ruling party to actually hear the frustrations of our people. And I can tell you now, we are speaking here right now on SABC, and I do not know with your statistics that how many people view your show, but I can tell you that they've dropped. Many people right now, as we speak, are load shedded. They know that perhaps we're going to have this interview. They know that your show is at this particular time, but they're not going to watch it. So yourself as SABC as well are having a problem. So that is why I was saying we must call on everyone in South Africa who's affected by this particular problem, by this particular issue of load shedding, to be able to act. Because right now, if I don't know which system you use to scan or to view your viewers, your viewership, like how many people are viewing the show and what they, but I can tell you in the previous days, it has dropped drastically, not because people do not love your show anymore, not because people do not love the views that come to your show anymore, but because people are load shedded. They are not going to have a view or have a feel of what your show today was about. So I think that everyone who's affected by this thing should be able to stand up. What we saw when Mapaila, when all political parties gathered, held each other's hands in the streets, calling for Zuma's removal. I think what they had always said, because I was following them, was that, look, we are saving South Africa. I think we need them more than ever right now. We need them to come together.
Okay.
We need the voice of COSATU more than ever. We need the voice of the SACP more than ever. They must come, they must join hands, they must hold each other's hands. We need those white people that we're filling the streets. We need them more than ever right now.
Okay.
Come, help us, South Africa, from load shedding. Help us save South Africa from the constant petrol hikes.
Okay, and that's where we're going to leave it. Thank you so much for your time this evening. That's ANC Youth League National Task Team spokesperson, Sizopila Mkize. After the break, we stay with matters Eskom still. Welcome back. We still continue to talk matters Eskom. The question of debt, Eskom's debt, has been a big one for a while. Take a listen to Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana in an interview we had with him on the show recently.
Eskom has accumulated debt to the extent that its capacity to service that debt now is questionable. And therefore, there's a general agreement in my view in the market when I look at the Article 4 report of the IMF, I look at what the World Bank is saying, I look at what all people are saying, is that the challenges that is facing the government is that we've got to think how to manage that debt for Eskom, not all of it, but some of it Eskom cannot afford. So that's a challenge we're facing. There's a secondary issue about the performance of Eskom, which is basically a problem. But before I deal with the basic issue of Eskom, I made the point in the budget speech that between 2013 and now, we spent about 300 billion rand trying to fix Eskom than fixing power to the grid. I think a combination of part of this discussion when we are restructuring Eskom's debt must be linked to how to ensure that there's less reliance on Eskom on electricity supply. And while we're fixing Eskom, we've got other players to be able to provide power to the grid, which is country needs.
My guests for this conversation are Pheli Ngomo, who is a development economist and Oxfam board chairperson. Ruth is the chief economist of the Efficient Group. Good evening to both of you. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening. Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening to you.
If I want to start with you, Pheli, why is this matter important?
This matter is so important for South Africa. I think part of it is that access to energy is the lifeline for the economy. It's a lifeline for many households. It's a lifeline for small, medium enterprises. It's a lifeline for hospitals and as well as children who actually have to prepare for their school. So it's really such an important matter. In fact, I hear the minister, for example, making reference to the amount of money that has been given to Eskom outside of its own debt. I mean, it's actually sitting at more than 80% of the debt that it is. And part of it does demonstrate that energy crisis or Eskom crisis is actually an issue that every citizen in South Africa should be concerned about, because it's actually such an inconvenience for everyone. But let alone the fact that the issues around productivity, for instance, I mean, in the context where the economy, for instance, is actually projected to grow at less than 2%, you don't even want to miss a single, a percentage from there. So now, when industries are going to come out and say, actually, our productivity has been affected by Eskom, and the implications again for even the investment. President has just hosted an investment conference and with massive commitments from various companies. So one of the key issues they're going to require for them to pack their bags and come to South Africa as a destination for investment, they are going to ask and say, we need support for energy infrastructure and what's going on. So this is really, really an important issue for South Africans.
Now, Davi, I mean, a lot of this money, or this debt, was accumulated. It's money that went into building your Medupis and your Kusiles, which are not giving us what we want, ironically.
Yes, I'm afraid to say the total outstanding debt of Eskom at the moment is approximately 400 billion rand. That is approximately 10% of South Africa's.
Okay, that line has frozen. Hopefully, we want to redial Davi. And this is the irony of this whole thing, Pheli, that we're now sitting with this huge debt. Your Medupis and Kusiles were supposed to give us, the power that we need. Davi, I believe we are back. You are back with us. Can you continue from where you left off? No? We still don't have him. This is the irony, as I was saying, that your Medupis and your Kosiles are not giving us the electricity we need.
I mean, it is an irony. I think it's indicating that, in fact, Eskom crisis is confluence of issues, by the way. Multiple variables. I think the first issue that is coming out very clearly is the issue around leadership and management. That's the first issue. I think we've been subjected to daily briefings about this is so much, this so much, but you're not seeing what we'd call medium to longitudinal planning in as far as how to come out of the situation. I mean, for us, we have about 45,000 megawatts and we lose 18,000. That's almost, just close to 50% of the energy capacity. And the implications are actually quite serious. So it's clear that even though there has been a public investment in as far as two power stations, right, which are meant to be generating power, but we're not really seeing it. And you're not really getting a clear response, both from Eskom leadership directly, but I even suppose the ministry responsible for it, because we've not heard from the ministry in terms of what's going on. And I do think that South Africans are looking for something that is much more solid and much more concrete in relation to how to deal with Eskom going forward.
Well, the National Youth League task team spokesperson thinks, the rate should go, thinks that Pravin Gordhan should go. I was speaking to her just now. But fact of the matter, though, is that this money has to be paid. And, it has to be taken from somewhere. You and I know where, who's going to suffer the most.
Absolutely. In fact, when I was actually reading the article, from National Treasury about them, wanting to look at different options, and I was thinking, I wonder what would be the options that they are, exploring. Because if you're sitting with 400 billion over, so obviously they are saying we need to help them for about 50% of the debt. So one option would be debt restructuring, right? Meaning that they'll go back to the institutions that were actually funding and look at the debt restructuring. The other one, which is a possibility, which from us, from a civil society sector in particular, gives us, makes us a little bit nervous. There's a possibility for a push for private equity partner to immediately take on as part of the debt, and then, and part of it, then it would mean that Eskom will no longer be a state-owned enterprises. And I understand where Treasury will be coming from, because, of course, this debt actually becomes a contingent liability. So it sits within now the balance sheet of the South African government, because Eskom is a state-owned enterprises. But, of course, for me, the key issue where we've not seen, it's how government has not been able to squeeze the Eskom leadership and ask them the questions, exactly what's going on. So if I make an example, so when Eskom was corporatized in 2001, the assumption is always that once a company gets corporatized, it can't be coming to the holding company and seeking help. So the minister is already saying, we've already given them 300 billion, right? So the key question is that, what type of measures, what are the checks and balances when you release funding? What are the things that we do? Because you've corporatized, you have executives that are earning massive amounts of money, and government is already starting even to say now, let's unbundle and look at separating generation, from transmission, etc. But the key question is that, what is it those who are dealing with Eskom on a daily basis are actually saying? So it's quite clear for me that the accountability instruments, if they're not, I think they're not existing, that's one. But also, two, we continue to let, Eskom leadership to get off with so much. And while they continue, all of them, in fact, now that it's the first week of July, none of them would have said they've not earned their income. They've all earned their income. But those who rely on Eskom, right, have not earned their income, some of them. Some of them, they're going to start looking at retrenchments, right? Some of the small, medium enterprises. And you can imagine the inconvenience as well, for public health care. So all of a sudden, the crisis of Eskom compels everyone else to start reconfigure their time and the management, and it's even worse in times where we don't even get a proper scheduling in terms of what time would we be off the grid. Now it means that everyone else gets disorganized, but the very Eskom who is disorganizing everybody else, they still, all of them, actually earn income. So there needs to be very strong punitive measures against those who are in position of power, but also fundamentally, we need to say, what is the both medium and the longitudinal plan to deal with the Eskom crisis? Because we can't go on like this. I mean, South Africa is classified as one of the most industrial countries, you know, in the African continent. And by the way, and all of us now, all of a sudden we have load shedding as often as possible. And obviously that has massive implication for even any other industrial program, by the way, that we intend to take. And I'm just remembering, just the last final point is that, by the way, I mean, if you think historically, Eskom is amongst the few companies that have contributed in the industrialization of this country. So in essence, if government present a program of industrialization and energy is an anchor of that industrialization, how are they going to industrialize when we don't have access to energy security, when there's no energy equity issues, and as well there are issues around energy sustainability?
Davi, I believe we have you back. I don't know if you concur with Pelis's view that perhaps the government is not asking the people at Eskom the right question.
Yes, I'm very sorry about this. I mean, this communication is absolutely a nightmare. All right, let me just give you a couple of numbers as an economist, and that is that the South African economy couldn't grow faster than 2% because of a lack of electricity in any event. That is with an assumption that we won't get worse than stage 4. Now we're getting stage 6, and I'm afraid we're probably going to knock down economic growth to 1.5% or less. And I'm afraid the possibility certainly is there that the South African economy can actually dip into a recession as well. Now, this is happening in an environment when living costs is going up, inflation is going up, interest rates are going up, and we are in very, very deep trouble in South Africa. We all have to understand that we are in very, very deep trouble in South Africa. If you want to point fingers, of course you can point fingers. I think that most fingers must be pointed at the South African government. We have a government that's caused immense damage to the South African economy. If you want to point fingers to the writer or to the management of Eskom, certainly you could point fingers to them, but I'm afraid that I don't think that they should be blamed for what's going on there. What is currently going on at Eskom has been coming for many, many years, and it's going to take many years to fix that. The debt of Eskom currently, and that's what I wanted to say previously, currently about 400 billion, which is approximately 10% of the South African economy. That is debt that is mostly guaranteed by you and me, by the taxpayer in South Africa. And I think what we should do is to take that debt on the balance sheet of the state. Unfortunately, and I think that's another finger that we need to point, and that is to Pravin Gordhan. Pravin Gordhan was Minister of Finance when the state-owned enterprises collapsed, mostly. He's currently the Minister of State-Owned Enterprises. He's the guy standing in the way of the restructuring of the state-owned enterprises in the past. So I think he should take much of the blame as well. But if we want to fix all of this, I'm afraid that the only thing that we can do at the moment is to try to get the private sector involved as much as we possibly can, take the debt of the Eskom on the balance sheet of the state, try to get private sector generation going as fast as possible, get rid of Gwede Mantashe is one of the obstacles in the way here, and try to get the private sector, because we are in so deep trouble. I mean, I don't have words to describe that. You know what the unemployment levels, the poverty levels and all of that is. We are in trouble, and what we've had up to now is simply not working. We need to do something else.
Well, Gwede Mantashe has been saying it's unfair to blame him when he's not responsible for Eskom. Belongs to someone else. Well,
he's not responsible. I need a minister that is responsible. I don't need an irresponsible minister. I need a responsible that takes responsibility. The ANC is not taking responsibility for anything, and I think it's high time for us as South Africans to understand this and to realize this and to make a political decision on what we think the future of South Africa should be. The problems in South Africa is not economic. I can, as an economist, I can give you the answer to our economic woes. That's not difficult to answer. You can get a first-year economic student to answer these. The problems are political. We've got a government that's causing immense damage to the economy, and they keep on doing that. And until we fix the political issues in South Africa, we will not fix the economic issues.
Well, the person I was talking to earlier was saying they want to mobilize young people across the political spectrum to go and do sit-ins at Eskom if need be. do a shutdown of the country. Are those things going to help?
I mean, yes and no. I think it's important to mobilize South Africans to be conscious about this. But ultimately, the key issue is really the planning component, right? We need to get the leadership of Eskom to come into the party and say, what is it that they are confronted with? We had actually 2 weeks ago that there was also an issue around sabotage within Eskom. And so it's possible that with the ups and downs of partly also leadership change, is that you're likely to be dealing with Eskom workers who are going through fatigue in relation to what's happening at Eskom. I also read an interesting article written by an engineer, black engineer who used to work at Eskom, and he's saying that actually you do have internal capacity within Eskom that can deal with some of the issues, but there is something called, there's an exclusive club of people who are controlling the thinking of what needs to be done. Now, I'm not saying that his views are appropriate, but you know, under these circumstances, you actually pick up any view to actually start looking and say exactly what are these confluence of issues that we're dealing with. We're dealing with corruption, you know, leadership crisis, poor coordination, and obviously the energy planning issue that sits between both the Minister of Minerals and Energy and Public Enterprises, by the way.
Davi, quick one, if we were to mobilize people, both in dealing with the Eskom debt problem, but also the operational problems of Eskom, what would they coalesce around?
Yeah, well, like I've said, I think the issues are not really at Eskom, but the answer to Eskom's problems is that take over the debt of Eskom because it's your and my debt anyway, and then break Eskom into smaller parts. Get the private sector participation in this. It's really no other way. And I'm afraid we have to stop with nonsense like putting people in positions that simply cannot do the job. It's called cadre deployment, and we have to start working on people that's got merit and people that can actually do the job. I'm afraid pointing the fingers at the current leadership of Eskom is not going to solve the issues. The problem is not the leadership of Eskom. The problem in South Africa is the leadership of South Africa. It's called the ANC government.
And that's all going to leave. Special thanks to both of you. Phyllis Ngomo is a development economist, and Oxfam board chairperson Ruth is the chief economist of the Efficient Group. And that's our show for tonight. To join us again tomorrow evening, same time. Good night.